I love this book. I love this book. I mean, and honestly, I really feel like this is your, now it doesn't have to be, why superlative, but this is your masterwork. This is, it's so, it's this fully immersive experience. So instead of you kind of just getting the polemic and the facts, and instead of just being right, I mean, your other books are right. You know what I mean? You're so right. And that's part of the pleasure of it. It's just, oh my God, she's right. And she supported the right. And now I can go out and make this argument myself in an intelligent way. I feel right. I feel right. This, I felt validated. You know, I felt experientially validated. And it's such a different value to get from literature, to feel validated as a human being struggling with this world of mirrors that we're living in, and to experience you that way. It was amazing. And a masterwork for this moment in particular, for a moment when so many of us feel so untethered and incapable of navigating a path through this house of mirrors that we're in, that it felt like a Jordan, that's what I wanted to say in my quote, like a Jordan Peele movie, in that it's like, oh my God, this is what is going on. Even if it's not what's going on for you specifically, it was like, this is what is going on. It's literature, duh. So
can I just pause and say thank you? That is huge for me to hear from you, Douglas. And I also just want to disclose that you were one of the early readers of the book, and I did receive an email from you, as one of the very first people who read it, just saying some of these things to me privately, and it was just so stabilizing for me to just feel like this experiment had at least worked for you. I mean, I don't know if it's going to work for everyone, but that it worked for you meant a ton to me. And I just really want to thank you for that. I mean, I want to thank you for your public support, but honestly, that private support meant so much to me. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I mean, for me, the other validation about it, and I kind of want to talk about this at the end of our conversation, if there's time, is the courage to venture into what I would call a more literary or artistic or personal or impressionistic style of writing while the earth is burning. To me, I've wanted to, there's some graphic novels I want to do, there's some fiction I want to do, there's some sort of creative work, and I feel, I don't know if it's guilty almost to go do them, because it's like, wait a minute, the world is burning. My child is going to try to live in it. How dare I take the time to do something more impressionistic, more symbolic? Yet, I mean, was there a moment where you had to, for yourself, justify a departure from what could be called straight up social justice advocacy to do a project like this?
Yeah, and I mean, I think I probably still feel that a little bit, but to be honest, it wasn't a choice between writing a polemic, I'm right, here's what to do book, and writing this book. It was really writing this book or just disappearing into speechlessness / silent scream. Like that was not going to be something I could do at that point, and I really did kind of write myself back into a place where I feel like I can be part of a conversation. Like I really did not know what to say about what was going on in that sort of second, third year of the pandemic. I needed to find another register for my voice because the old one just was not working for me. And if I believed that just another argument about why we needed to do something about climate change was going to move the needle in any way, then I would have done it. It's the fact that I didn't feel that led me to try to find some other way of writing. And it really was, honestly, I went back to school to write this book. I never studied writing. I never studied creative writing. I never even studied journalism. I just did it. I was an English literature and philosophy major, but I really just wrote for my campus newspaper and then got jobs and then started writing books. And so I was pretty self-taught and suddenly grounded, as we all were. I wasn't able to lead the itinerant lifestyle that I have been leading for a lot of my adult life, which makes it hard to take on, to take a course. I mean, I'm never in one place long enough to do anything like that. So I thought, well, this is a gift. And I should enroll. Like originally, my idea was like a lot of the writing schools were offering online courses. Like Iowa was offering online writing courses. I thought maybe I can take a creative nonfiction course and get back to why I wanted to be a writer in the first place. And maybe if I can't get excited about content, I can get excited by form. And make a long story short, I just didn't enroll in Iowa's online courses. I think I felt like because I'm, somewhat of a known person that I would feel too self-conscious doing that. And so my friend V, formerly Eve Ensler, wonderful playwright, I was talking to her about this and my feelings of speechlessness and my desire to find another kind of writing and just at least get excited about writing if I couldn't get excited about what I had to say in that moment. And she introduced me to this amazing writing teacher whose name is Harriet Clark, a fantastic fiction writer as well, but who has taught at Iowa, taught at Stanford. And Harriet took me on as a private student and I went back to school and she had me doing writing exercises and this the idea for this very strange project, which I assume you'll explain at some point.
It'll be in the intro.
Came to me, and it did really start in that sort of way of like, this form is exciting to me. It is exciting to me to use my own doppelganger and identity confusion to talk about all these different ways that we double ourselves individually and collectively. Personal branding, optimized wellness, Israel, Palestine, ethnic doubles. I mean, the whole shebang. And I thought that is weird enough to get me excited about form. And then the content followed, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great, actually. Because, I mean, the way it felt like what had happened maybe was that this situation, although it's also the other way to tell the same story, is this situation that you were in with this living doppelganger mirror image phenomenon. It required you to take some action. In other words, this is a response, this is a way of kind of digging out of that.
Well, you either need to, defend your identity, and be try to be the last Naomi standing, I am not she, or you do what doppelganger books do, which is use the doppelganger as a mirror to understand yourself better and to understand the us that is not the they, because those lines always get blurry. And so, part of it was just like I went deep in the doppelganger canon. That was another fun thing, I just started reading books about, I was reading Dostoevsky and Edgar Allan Poe and Octavia Butler and Ursula Le Guin. And then in the end, it was Roth. In the end, it was Shylock that it was Operation Shylock that got me so excited that I had to write this. But also, you said Jordan Peele, like, spending those lonely pandemic evenings, watching doppelganger films and realizing it really is this very, very rich. I mean, this as a theater person, because theater people are always studying like the shadow self and the doubles and all this, but this was a little bit new to me and it was fun, and it had that thrill of the new, because the thing about, I think maybe your listeners like last heard me talking about the climate crisis, and that is indeed what I talk about most of the time. And I still do climate research. I head up a research center at a university related to climate justice. It started to feel like I don't know how to just say the same thing over and over again. I have to find a new entry, and this felt this felt like a new way in.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like I'm leaving that world. It feels like I'm finding another access point.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm helping other people find an access point.
The piece I want to write for, I don't know who, N+1, one of those places about this book is I want to compare your like first books with Brecht and this book with Artaud and Theater and Its Double. And really talk about kind of the need for participatory, felt, personalized experience. And then Artaud also wrote about the plague. I mean, it's a really fun way into this. If I could justify
I would love that. And honestly, that I would love to read that. And because I'm still learning so much about this literature. And, as you know, the fun part about putting a book in the world is there's this whole other stage of learning all the things that you didn't know. And I knew that this material was going to be fun for people like you to think with,
It is, that's the thing. It's fun to think and feel with is the other thing, and feel with it, because then you can move into these more impressionistic landscapes and get other kinds of insights, which are usually scary to do at a time like this for reasons precisely that are discussed in this book. And, and that's, for me, what's going on here is how much are we allowed to allow our emotional felt reality into our decision-making and our perceptual apparatus at a time when it seems so many people are being led astray by emotionality and charisma. But we can't surrender it to them.
That's the moment. That's the moment when you most need to do it, right? And because they are not being led into this world through facts. They're being led there through feeling. And, that's one of the arguments I make in the book is that conspiracy culture, and I say culture, not theory, because I think there's a way that I think there are real conspiracies in this world, and we have to be very careful not to be so credulous, right? That suddenly we're like, oh, anybody who believes that there's a conspiracy out there about anything must be bonkers. I mean, that's not what I believe. Anyone who's read the Shock Doctrine knows that I spent a good part of my career actually documenting real conspiracies that we can prove. Like the CIA was involved in destabilizing Allende's government and knew full well that they were plotting a coup in Chile, and on and on and on, and down to like more, recent news items. Like it seems like Tesla is suppressing information about their battery range. There's a lot of people in on that. So we can't. It's just that it's not like a nefarious plot to get the adrenochrome from, a bunch of 12-year-olds. It's just the same old, capitalist growth, profit, dominance, etc. So, but there is a feeling that is being tapped into in conspiracy culture where there's often truth there. Like there's truth. They're tapping into a fear of surveillance, right? It's not your vaccine app that is putting you under surveillance, but maybe it is your phone, and maybe we aren't dealing with that, and we aren't dealing with all the anxieties that are unleashed by that. So we have to be willing to access those feelings, look at the monster in the mirror, do all of that shadow work. And I guess, coming back to your question around like, should we be doing this when the world's on fire? I think part of what becomes clear when you dig into this literature and cinematic history is that it's precisely in the most destabilizing, fiery, monstrous moments that the figure of the doppelganger is most used in the arts, right? Like the first theoretical work trying to understand doppelganger art was by Freud's protege, Otto Rank, the Austrian psychoanalyst. He wrote it in 1914. It's called the Double or Der Doppelganger. And his translator speculated, well, it's probably no coincidence that this is the first year of the First World War, that all of this doppelganger art is out there in the culture, like the Student of Prague, and that people are trying to understand their monstrous sides, their most repressed desires. And then there's Chaplin, in 1940
Right.
with The Great Dictator and this master work of anti-fascism. And he does it by, how do you implicate yourself more than making yourself Hitler and the Jewish barber?
Yeah.
And here's Chaplin, who kind of has this weird thing where he sort of looks like Hitler, like they both have the miniature mustaches. And this is, the layers are fascinating, but anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. So, this kind of all started for you anyway, specifically in 2011 around Occupy. And I remember that moment because I was writing articles kind of for Occupy, about Occupy, trying to help people in the mainstream understand that just because they're not saying there's an agenda doesn't mean there's not a purpose here. I was trying to say Occupy is a new normative state. And, the CNN and MSNBC, everyone was upset that there were no demands. And I was like, no, this is not about demands. This is about a new way that we're occupying reality, occupying a thing. And then Naomi Wolf pops up with... These are the 10 or whatever. These are the 10 demands, the official demands of the movement. And people are saying, oh, these are, because you would think of Occupy as a more Naomi Klein thing than a Naomi Wolf thing. Oh, here's Naomi Klein's official 10 demands of Occupy. And then I think from that moment on, we were off to the races, right?
It was awkward, Douglas. Especially because, just for very niche reasons for me, that I don't expect other people to understand. But I have been in, a kind of a movement intellectual, since my 20s. And it's a complicated space to occupy, to be the person writing books when people are out there in the streets, getting arrested and, putting their bodies on the line and doing the hard work, often anonymous work of organizing. And then here's this person who's like in all the newspapers and getting all this attention. And because there's an inherent contradiction in that, and there has been since I published No Logo, just as the protests in Seattle were exploding against the World Trade Organization, where I am very careful not to speak for movements, I am very careful not to, always to be very clear that there is a difference between somebody who writes books about movements and somebody who is leading those movements. And, it's something I care about. I don't expect other people to care about the fact that I care about it, but I care about it, And so, that you're referring to this really true moment, okay, which if you'll just bear with me, I'll set the scene for you. Which was, it was the height of Occupy Wall Street. And there was a march through the financial district. And it was kind of a show of strength because the police were threatening to evict the park. And in the middle of the march, I needed to pee, went into a public restroom in one of these big buildings. And I was in the stall and I heard two women talking about me like that, and it was that terrible, mean girl feeling of like, oh my God. And one woman said to another woman, did you hear what Naomi Klein wrote about her? And they were just scathing about what Naomi Klein had written about the movement. I don't think she understands our demands. And I was just in the stall, just frozen going, oh my God, what had I written? And then the more I listened, the more I realized who they were talking about. And it was not me, it was her. Because like you, I had seen her waiving the demands that she alone had defined based on some random surveys online. And so I came out and I said words that I would say many, many, many times in the future. I think you're talking about Naomi Wolf. But yes, that's when I think when she was more clearly identified as somebody who wrote books about feminism and childbirth and women's bodies, and I was more like the anti-capitalist climate change person, the lines dividing our areas of expertise were a little bit clear. I think there were, and then they went wobbly around 2011. But I think probably before that, there were people who were just like, oh, there's a couple of loudmouth Jewish Naomis just opining about things.
Kind of lefty and kind of anti-something.
Yeah, kind of lefty.
Yeah.
kind of have highlights
Right.
in
And
their
act
hair.
all intellectual and say some things I don't understand, but all right. Yeah. But interestingly for me, that her need to specify and characterize, this is what Occupy is. To take something that was, I don't mean nebulous, but not defined in that discrete way, and name it, felt a little bit like conspiracy culture in general, which is, I mean, you and I might say 9/11 happened partly because of American policies. We trained the terrorists. There's on the surface of the story, there is huge American complicity and conspiracy. It's enough. But the conspiracy culture goes on to say, and there's like dynamite set in the World Trade. They come with the very specific thing. They kind of land on it. Or the brilliant piece you wrote about COVID conspiracy. It's like, yes, there's problems with the vaccines. There's problems with Fauci. There's problems with the CDC. There could be this. There could be that. Bill Gates and the availability of that. There's a huge amount of problems. We don't need to go to nanobots that respond to 5G towers. And I understand, because the systemic critique is difficult to hold in one's head. The idea of nanobots in the virus is easy. The systemic critique of Occupy is nebulous and unsettling. These specific demands is easy. And it feels like that's the on the mirror side of the equation here is a culture that is kind of incapable of holding the sensation, holding the systemic problem, which doesn't necessarily have a person to blame or a piece of
Absolutely. I think a systemic analysis is not going to offer that sort of Hollywood like unveiling, like, it's all Charles Schwab's fault, or it's all Bill Gates's fault. The cabal, right? And this is why, the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory is like the oldest and most recurrent conspiracy theory around. And it's why it is described as the socialism of fools, because, and I think we could say all of conspiracy culture in a sense is the socialism of fools, right? Because instead of looking at an analysis of what capitalism was built to do, right, which is to maximize profits and grow at all costs, no matter the cost on people, on the natural world, you're looking for like a room somewhere where 10 people just plotted the whole thing. And if we could just get rid of those 10 people, then everything would be fine. And that's why people like Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon love this and their billionaire backers, because it actually is incredibly good for power to have people distracted on some far off, if we could just prove, that there was the dynamite that blew up, the Twin Towers, or we could just prove, that this was a plot between, the Chinese Communist Party and Bill Gates to depopulate the earth or whatever, then we're not talking about the conspiracies in plain view, right? The people who didn't have to die because we didn't have to, systematically underfund our public healthcare system and our elder care. And we could have had schools with smaller classrooms and more teachers and more nature education and air purifiers and all these things that actually were not just wear your mask, get your vax, not just individual solutions, but actually collective political responses, right? So, I don't think, one of the things that the book gets into is like what it's shocking to a lot of people who used to know Naomi Wolf that she would be on Steve Bannon's podcast, every day for 2 weeks, which, happened in one period that people might not know. They published a book together. They put out T-shirts together. Like, I'm not saying she's a guest on his podcast. I'm saying they are actually, in league together. Now, I think it's kind of not that interesting what she's getting from him, which is a very large audience. She had already been kind of ejected from liberal left society. She'd made some pretty big foundational errors in her books. She had been kind of, I don't like the term, but kind of canceled. And she's getting a whole new massive audience from these guys. But I think the more interesting question is, what are they getting from her? And what are they getting from other conspiratorial figures like that, including RFK Jr.? Why does Bannon love RFK Jr.? And I think part of it has to do with the role that conspiracy plays as a distraction from those systemic critiques.
But they also get, something from us. Steve Bannon, to my delight and horror, read an entire section of my book Team Human aloud on War Room Pandemic. And it was a section of the book that I looked at, and there's nothing I can really change in it to defend it from being used in that context, was talking about the human spirit, the grounded human local spirit, and our kind of battle against the technocracy and the use of technology to program us into submission, and, you meet your neighbor and, have bond together. A very, put the social back in socialism kind of passage. And he read it as basically evidence that someone who's very knowledgeable about the tech industry and tech world understands that they are out to get us. And it's true on a certain level, right? These technologies are biased towards dehumanized things. They're agents of capitalism. They want to extract value and surveil. It's Shoshana Zuboff, with a bit of my sort of humanism thrown in. And I didn't know how to feel about that. It's like, on the one hand, a million people.
I think you should, hear
it, but
I think you should, that's very interesting, and I can relate to that out of body feeling. But I don't think you should beat yourself up over it, except to the extent that you are if it is the case that you are no longer out there screaming, making those arguments because they are, then that is something I think to be self-critical about.
But there is that moment, and you write about it in the book, that once they say it, I don't want to say it anymore. I heard the woman.
But you need to say it extra more.
It's hard. The Italian dictator lady, the one they voted in, the dictator lady. See, I'm really precise. The far right.
Giorgia Meloni.
Yeah.
Giorgia Meloni, yeah.
It sounded like she was reading from my book. We are human beings. We are embodied. We will not let money or technology.
Yeah, well, with some transphobia and some, massive racism.
Right.
Mixed in.
And also she said, we are under attack as Christians and white people. Yeah, there's a little of that.
I am a woman. Yeah. Yeah.
But right. So you're saying we double down. We reclaim it. Don't.
Well, look.
Yeah.
Because, when before I started writing books, I edited a small left-wing magazine in Canada called This Magazine, which is a strange name for a magazine. It used to be called This Magazine is About Schools. It was it was founded by 60s radicals. They expanded it from This Magazine from being about schools to being just an alternative left magazine. So they just changed it to This Magazine. Anyway, in the mid-90s, we did a piece on the rise of the new right as represented by Gingrich. And, there was a Canadian version of this. There were people like David Frum, who then, went on to work for George W. Bush. And we had a series of profiles of these guys trying to understand what they're tapping into. And one of the writers for that issue, Doug Saunders, wrote something about how one of these figures, whose name won't mean much to American listeners, was using some arguments that came from the left. And he said, we can't be angry if he's using them because we left them unattended. And I always think about that,
It's a great line.
It is a great line. And if you think about Bannon, that is his skill. He looks at the issues and the people who we, air quotes, but like we liberal leftists, however you defined it, have left unattended, abandoned, ejected. And he says, come on over. And it's not because he agrees with your book at all, Douglas. I mean, this is a guy who teamed up with the Mercers to do like the worst kind of, AI surveillance. This is his jam. He loves surveillance capitalism. I mean, he was deep in the Cambridge Analytica stuff. It's not about what he believes. It's about what he understands to be powerful. And he sees that the issue that people are frightened of what is happening with their humanity, and they should be in the age of surveillance capitalism and AI. And he sees that there are a lot of broken promises by mainstream Democrats to do something about these tech companies. And in the same way that in 2016, he saw that working class, blue collar workers in deindustrialized areas had been abandoned by the Democratic Party, who said that they were going to challenge these free trade deals and just signed more of them. He sees an opportunity. That's all that's happening, I think, with your ideas, or my ideas. It's not about conviction. It's that he is a smart strategist, and smart strategists know that it is wise to look at who your opponents are abandoning and what issues that used to be theirs that they are now neglecting, and just bring them into the fold, and of course, mix them in with the real agenda, which is, anti-immigrant and now transphobia. But the real agenda, of course, is just power. I mean, he says it openly on the podcast. The plan is to take power for 100 years. That's what he likes to say.
Right. So it doesn't matter that he says technocrats are a problem, right? So he agrees with the basic and whatever we want to call it, the sort of the social dilemma critique, which is another set of problems of its own. That's my mirror world. I did Team Human, they did Team Humanity. I do, Present Shock, they do Time Well Spent. It's an interesting mirror world for me, but it's not as extreme as what you went through. But right, so just because Bannon agrees that the technocracy is out of control doesn't mean we should stop. But and the line.
Well, we also shouldn't take him at his word. I mean, I think he may or may not agree with it. What he thinks is that other people out there agree with it. I mean, same thing around surveillance. I don't think he's serious about that because his actions, would say otherwise. But, in the same way that he knew that Trump needed to say that he was going to renegotiate the trade deals and bring the jobs home and protect Medicare and protect Social Security. I mean, this is an effective political agenda. And then what do they do once in power? They hand massive tax cuts to the rich, hire a whole bunch of guys from Goldman Sachs. I mean, it's rampant hypocrisy. But what he knows is what people want to hear.
Right. And that it works, or there's enough of a grain of truth. I mean, the line in the book is great. Once an issue is touched by them, it seems to become oddly untouchable by almost everyone else. And that, to me, it was it was one of those rug pull-out moments. Like, oh my God, I've been running from thing to thing. It's like, okay, they said that. I'm going to run on to something else now. So I'm going to talk about Judaism. I'm going to talk about technology. I'm going to talk about this because they catch me and then recontextualize it in another way. And I abandon my own babies in that sense. You know what I mean? And you're right. We've got to come back. So when you do, basically, which one? The disaster capitalism. And then we see the sort of the crazy mirror world critique of Great Reset and Klaus Schwab and those guys. The beauty of that moment, the learning of that moment for me was you went and wrote a piece saying, hang on, everybody. This is the real problem. This is the crazy version of that problem. We must not let the crazy version of the problem take our eyes off the real one, and that was, you took a lot of heat for that. I remember on Twitter, all the conspiracy people were saying, oh, she's part of the thing now. Do you remember that?
They're always saying that. Oh, yeah. Oh. Well, I mean, I daily get harangued and told to read my own books.
But were you already in?
No, that was the moment. Yeah, that was the moment when they decided that I was a lost cause.
but was that the moment then that you were deciding to then investigate the mirror world? It seems like it was like that was when you were saying, for me, it was what I called fractal noia back in my book, Present Shock. I was like, look, we're getting really good at connecting the dots, but sometimes we then create a picture that's not real. I called it fractal noia. It's this paranoia, because we want there to be a story to it, even when there may not be a story, when it might just be a lot of shit happening in a systemic way. The drive for narrative.
It was definitely one of the moments. Yeah. I had a little run-in. I won't get into the details, but with the Great Reset, where the thing about the Great Reset that was so interesting to me is, unlike these other conspiracies that we've been talking about, where they are unproven, right? Like where people are saying something that they're without facts to support them, without evidence to support them. The Great Reset is another beast entirely. It has all the forms of a conspiracy theory, right? Like, I found this and look at that, it's connected. Except for there's a website and explainer videos up on the WEF website. So it's like, I say in the book, like, what is this drive to reveal the not hidden? Like if this is a conspiracy theory, it's the only one with its own explainer videos starring the King of England, like literally King Charles, then Prince Charles, like was explaining what the Great Reset. And the only way that you could sort of see this as a revelation is if you've never heard of the World Economic Forum before. And like this whole thing is new, right? Like what? Like every year, like a whole bunch of like elites go up on a Swiss mountaintop and then like try, and you can understand how people get like really worked up about it. Because the thing is it's an important reality check. Like, yeah, that is really quite bonkers. We should not put up with that. But the fact is, it's not a conspiracy. It's actually just the way the world works, right? So that one is very, very interesting to me. That piece was called The Great Reset Conspiracy Smoothie, if anybody would like to look it up. But yeah, I think that was the beginning of my interest in trying to pick these things apart. And then, like for me, I did go through that phase where I was like, okay, so does this mean I can't write about the Shock Doctrine anymore because it's been so kind of polluted and turned into this doppelganger of itself, and now is it unusable? And then things still happen, like, the horrific fires on Maui. And I still hear from grassroots activists who say, there is real shock doctrine going on here. And it would be helpful if, you could help us amplify this, like there are real estate speculators who are coming in, before the bodies have even been found, trying to get people to sell their ancestral homes. There is still a whole agenda that is being pushed down people's throats. And that's when I realized, no, we can't give up like you said, we cannot give up what we truly believe in just because they are polluting it. Nothing would be a bigger gift to Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson, and Georgia Maloney and the rest of them if people on the left believed that we needed to shut up about the things that we believe in because they have co-opted parts of them. In fact, I think it's if it's possible to bring people back from these worlds, it's going to be because there are robust movements that speak to the same feelings that are being warped and exploited by the Steve Bannons of the world, but actually provide real responses that are going to improve people's lives, like debt relief or universal health care. Not to be a boring leftist, but it is.
Right, but it was part of our mutual attraction to Bernie, even, because it was like, okay, huge, and that's why, I had no problem with Bernie Sanders going on Joe Rogan. It's like, bring them, give them an alternative, go right in the belly of their beast and say, no. We're all united, but that's a whole other story. But we're workers.
I'm with you. I absolutely supported Bernie going on Rogan, going on Fox. I think when you're a political candidate, you're trying to get elected, you want to reach those people. And whether or not you want to, be excited about the endorsement, that's a separate debate. But making the arguments, absolutely, you do that.
Yeah, and the way that you decided to bring us through this, it's interesting. In the book, there's this moment where you're like, oh, I think it's a regular thing where your dog sees itself like in the storm door. It sees its mirror. And like barks at itself every night when the reflection's just right. And each time you go and you say, "It's okay, baby. It's fine." It's this great moment. But for that to be the turning point.
That's, by the way, her doppelganger. That's what I'm most proud of in the book. I'm trying to put the word doppelganger into the culture, and I'd like your help with that.
All right, I will use it. We'll call this episode Doppelganger. But as a moment for insight, it's, for me, that was the gateway to why you went in a literary direction with the project. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't the tax report from Monsanto that sent you. It was your dog looking at its reflection that set off the journey, which then which is why it ends up being such a more. I'm not going to judge it like that. Such a holistic, experiential journey rather than just a factual journey. Do you know what I mean? You dimensionalize it in a different way, which then ends up. There's people, if they don't read the book, they're going to think, "Oh, this is a hit book, like a hit piece on Naomi Wolf." Which it is not. It is so empathetic to what your doppelganger is experiencing on the other side of the mirror, because it's you. Do you know? It's not you, but it is. You know, and you're allowed to do that because you don't have to agree with her. This is a story now. It's literature. This is like closer to Moses and monotheism, right? Then do you know what I mean? It's like that. It's this mental, emotional adventure that you go on that then gets you to that place to see the thing. So then, though, it creates, and I hate to use this word, but for me, it created a safe space to start thinking about stuff that I'm not allowed to think about, right? So, mirrors. So here's the mirror that, although I think now you answered this with the early part. So, nationalism, the extreme nationalism, and the is a version of identity politics for mirror people, right?
Yeah.
And it for me, it contaminated and nullified some of the identity politics going on our side. But there's a way. So if we see, okay, in the mirror, identity politics looks like nationalism, which are bullshit myths and supremacy. But how do we then, my impulse, as soon as I see it, is, okay, so we got to stop doing identity politics on our side, because look how the healthier response is what?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot to learn from why their form of nationalism is so dangerous, and I think it's because it is it's a supremacist version of nationalism, right? Like, it's not about pride, pride in place. I think you can have pride in place, pride in community, pride in culture, without it being a supremacist idea that my culture is better than your culture, which, begins the slippery slope down to, and therefore I can, annihilate your culture. And so, yeah, I think identity politics can, to quote Olufemi Taiwo, it can be a bridge of connection, of experiences and histories of oppression is connective tissue in this world, right? Or it can be a wall. It's a choice whether or not it is a bridge of connection between people, which is not to say that that bridge erases difference. Just because I have a bridge, just because I can connect with you, just because I can identify with an experience, just because I can empathize, doesn't mean that I'm saying it's the same, that I am you, that my experience is the same as yours, right? That we're going to all come together in some mushy sameness, right? it is different than the kind of proprietary trauma, right, that I try to grapple with in the section of the book around Israel Palestine, around like, I look at Israel as an example of what Carolyn Rooney, is a British scholar of the Middle East, calls doppelganger politics, right? Where you define yourself against the other, where you have this sort of foundational division of not them, me because we are not them, right? And of course, there's these deep kind of psychosocial mimicries going on, right, by an oppressed people, the Jews, who have experienced that all over Europe, being the other and being the evil twin of Christianity, being the devil to the godly, right? I mean that, and then getting this sliver of land where this gets to be reenacted on another people. But I've been returning to these themes, all my writing life, and I tried to write it in a different way. I tried to write it in a way that has a little more self-compassion, because I think that I have in the past been more just in denunciation mode. And I'm not saying there's no room for that, but I'm just saying, I'm just trying a different register and seeing if it lands a little bit with some people who maybe wouldn't have been able to hear a denunciation.
Right. But it ends up being more revealing, more personally revealing and exposing, which is the triumph of the book, is to prove that, look, if you go here, it ends up better. If you're willing to actually do the work. I'm so glad
that you see that.
You know what I mean? You showed up. You showed up in a different way for this, and in a way that I do in my talks, and I'm often scared to in my writing, to actually show up and wrestle out loud and reveal the actual thoughts as the devil and angel on the shoulders, and the actual conversation as it happens. But then to do it, and it's like, and we end up okay at the end of it, to me, is the healing power of the book. It's like, no, this actually is going to be okay. Don't do what they're doing. In other words, to keep drawing the line. But it's so hard.
And it's demanding, right? Like what this moment demands a lot from all of us, right? And that, to come back to what you were saying at the start around, like, is it a distraction from the fires, or is it another way into them, right? And I feel like, and you wrote this to me personally about this sort of the need to use the whole kind of arsenal of the arts, but also of personal experience and these sort of painful, I don't know if they're confessions or how you want to describe them, but I don't think you can ask people to do hard things if you're not willing to do them yourself. Like, I think that I think I am trying to model a vulnerability, a self-criticism. What I'm trying to not do is be outside and wagging my finger and saying, you people out there just worried about your personal brands, just worried about, your clout, your this, your that. We're all in it. We're in it, and I don't think we can hear it if we're hearing it, if it's somebody pretending they're not in it, if it's somebody pretending they're outside of it and better than it. Because it's too hard to be implicated in these absolutely horrific systems. Like everything we're talking about is a way of not looking, is a way of not looking at what it means to be alive today, when the crimes of the foundational crimes of our countries are being unveiled, when the crimes of our futures that we are personally implicated in this very moment, in the energy that we're consuming, having this conversation, in what we are wearing and what we eat, like, we are in it. We are in these systems. And COVID, I think, those COVID years, those plague years, where the unveiling of the lockdown classes' dependency on, hyper exposed, so-called essential workers who are actually sacrificial workers. It was just, everything was just pulled back, and our implications, like in this necropolitics,
Right.
we couldn't hide from it anymore, right? And so I think that moment where you have the racial justice reckonings of 2020, you have climate change becoming now, not future. You have the pandemic unveiling all of these inequalities and not being able to hide from them anymore. It is no wonder that a whole bunch of people decided to run into fantasy land and say, fuck no, I am not looking at that.
Right.
I'm going to look at anything but that. But it's way too easy to say, well, we're the ones who are just looking at it all the time, because a lot of us are just looking at Barbie, like a lot of us are just watching streaming television. So like, let's be honest that it's hard for all of us, and there's lots of different ways to look away. And so I don't think you can talk about something like that unless you're willing to just really lay yourself a little bare, right?
Right. Which then makes the critique of the other, whoever's on the other side of the mirror, more valid. I mean, I was concerned that people might think, when you write about Doppelganger, that one of two things could happen. Either what I said before, that people will think, oh, this is a hit piece on Naomi Wolf, or worse, that people will think you're saying there's good people on both sides. It's just a mirror. And we on the left have to remember that they're human beings,
Yes.
in the mirror land. And let's be, we should be. I am sympathetic or empathetic or something, whatever the right word is. I have compassion. I was there at the moment that I've always thought was the moment that sent Naomi down the wrong
Yeah, I was
path.
wondering
And
if you were going to share.
Yeah, I think I talked about it with you once. And it was, and I've told the readers about this moment, but not that she was involved in it. It was at John Brockman, the agent's house, where Richard Dawkins and other scientists, materialist scientists of his ilk, are arguing with Naomi. And Naomi Wolf is saying that she thinks that materialism can't explain the entirety of our reality. And that's fine. Wittgenstein and many philosophers have brought us there. Human beings have systems of meaning. Materialism is an assumption. There could be, you don't have to go, into science fiction or craziness to think that there's stuff here that can't be explained by a purely materialistic determinist lens. And they were laughing at her, and I tried to defend her, and that's why I was the one who brought up Wittgenstein terribly. It really didn't work at all. But they laughed at us. They called me a moralist. They called her superstitious. Her own husband was there, not even defending her in that moment. And it was so... Wow. I was red-faced, she was red-faced. It was so humiliating to have important, the leading world scientists say that we were idiots. And if you don't have room, if consensus culture doesn't have any wiggle room for those who see a little differently, who go, there's something else, there's maybe humans are invested with soul, maybe consciousness did precede matter, maybe we don't know everything that's going on. If you don't have room for that, where's it going to go? It's going to find allies among the crazies, in the worst of places. So when we have I try to write a piece on Medium just saying, there's reasons why people might, this is before COVID, there's reasons why people might be concerned about their kids having vaccines. And if we don't at least acknowledge those concerns, we're going to push them further into conspiracy, which of course is what happened. So in some ways, I feel like she is also a victim. I have a lot of friends, I'm sure you do too, who went QAnon, who went over.
Yeah,
people,
and you also wrote a
acquaintances.
piece that had a big impact on me when I was doing this research around the role of addiction, like social media addiction, right? So I think that's one piece of it, of just being kind of shut down and shut out, and having all of these unsayable subjects. And then where it really gets toxic is when you have, a really deep need for those dopamine hits. So I think, especially when it comes to like the the leading figures here, right? Because we're talking about like industrial scale misinformers, and there's a distinction. There's the people who are really leading the misinformation, and there are the people who are just consuming it mainly, right? And the reason why it's effective is because there's millions of people who are just consuming it, who are clicking, who are buying, who are subscribing, right? Because this is filling something in them. They're not necessarily getting the attention, right? And those are, I think, very, very different incentive structures that we need to unpack. But I think when it comes to the people I'm writing about, who are who are getting a lot of traction, a lot of followers, like getting their follower counts tripled, quadrupled, it's an addiction. There is something that's going on there. I mean, I don't like to psychoanalyze, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about what you've observed there.
It's a feedback loop, if nothing else. You kind of you surmise something. You go, well, I bet that if you get the vaccine, I bet you shed vaccine poisons everywhere you go. So if the vaccine makes you sterile and vulnerable to 5G, and then you're teaching in a classroom and speaking, the vaccine's coming off you and going on to the kids, and when you do say that, it ends up some school board or whatever, or running a place in Florida, will end up banning teachers who have been vaccinated, right? So the words have meaning, even if they came about, and I get it, they do come about. You guess something, you add to the story just a little bit, and a whole bunch of people comment, yeah, that's right. It's like the ultimate yes and, improv actor.
Oh,
improv. The yes and is a beautiful feeling inside, especially if you've been, like Naomi was, and a lot of people were, kind of cast out from, the chattering class culture. You're not allowed to write for the Times op-ed anymore. So all of a sudden, Elon and his kids are behind you.
Yep.
And we've lost journalists to that, though. I mean, I remember what it's like to write something for an editor, and they make you cut out those 2 paragraphs that are your favorite ones, and they say no. But now what happens is they cut out those 2 paragraphs, and you go, fine, I'm taking my ball and going on Substack. Right? And we've watched a lot of mutual friends go there, too.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, like, as an earlier draft of the book, I made like a list of a lot of the people who probably people are thinking of right now. And I ended up taking it out just because I thought, people are good. Everybody has their own version of this. Like if you're in the yoga and wellness world, you have a different list than I have, right? If you're in this sort of alt spirituality world, you have another list of people who really, really changed during COVID, because they started to get that kind of magic carpet ride, digital magic carpet ride when they said particular things, right? So in the end, I didn't end up listing those names, but I'm sure that your listeners and viewers are filling in the blanks themselves. And, But it is not just about her, right? And nor is this doppelganger thing just about me. I mean, this is like, I think in the age of AI, right? I think probably everybody listening is going to have the experience of watching a video of somebody who seems to be them saying something that is not them. And that chill of the doppelganger, only it'll be, digitally produced.
Yeah, no, a lot. I've been saying, first they came for the cab drivers, and I said nothing because I'm not a cab driver, right? And they were basically getting doppelganged first by, autonomous vehicles, which aren't really happening. But and it forces the cabbie, the London cabbie in particular, say, who knows the whole A to Z, to think, well, what's the difference between me and that thing in Mirror World? But right now, I feel like AI, it's not that AI is coming for us all, which it may be, but I can't really attest to that quite yet. It's still so pathetic. But the AI, even as a thought experiment, forces us to go, are we creating a mirror of the whole thing?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the part that is scariest, because it is a mimicry machine, right? And so what are the implications for new thoughts, and it gets marketed as, oh, it's going to solve all these things. And it's just the opposite. It's just a remix culture. It's just, it can't actually do anything new. But I think already artists are having that experience of having to compete with, a doppelganger, AI doppelganger version of themselves.
Right. And the problem goes away if we're willing to, again, just challenge capital. I have so many artists who are like, oh no, they could do this, they could do that. And I'm like, you've got to challenge the underlying assumption that your artistry is a job, that you're employed by the art market. In other words, AI, and if we could push through it, it could become our salvation in the sense that we realize, oh, this whole money system, this whole thing, this whole notion of employment, and that art needs to be scarce in order to be valuable, and we got to break the whole thing. It's the same with Social Dilemma and all those things where your students, after watching the movie, said, well, God, haven't these guys heard of capitalism? It's so hard.
I mean, this is why the whole discourse, and I, kind of just replicated it, but I try to be judicious around, like, the problem is not the machines. The problem is not AI. It is a particular business model that wants us to believe that it's just the machines that are doing it on their own, when it is a handful of extractive companies that are just grabbing all of human creation and privatizing it behind, new digital enclosures. And that's what we have to talk about.
Right. But it's funny, though, that when you talk about, AI as kind of the civilizational level doppelganger, there's all of our individuals, and we have the man on the train, or, the various Jungian that you find your double and engage with it, that now when we do it on a civilization-wide level, when it's the fact that it's gone that it's gone meta is kind of forcing us again to look at, well, what does it mean? What does it mean to be human here? Collectively. And it reminded me, I started to think about, what were the Aztecs and Incas thinking when the conquistadors came over? And it's like, they look like human beings. They have two legs. They speak out of their mouths, but they're an entirely different thing. They're trying to, do you know what I mean? It's like that finally, that we are experiencing, even the West, we are experiencing ourselves as indigenous style beings with the emergence of a mirror double, finally, to make us go, oh, wait a minute. That we may get to collectively have the experience that you got to describe on a personal level in the book.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if there's Nick Coldry and Ulysses Mejas wrote this paper a bunch of years ago, Data Colonialism, looking at these parallels. And I think they've got a new book coming out. I should probably have them on to talk about it. But I think there are lessons to be learned from anti-colonial struggles. Like if we're understanding these as new enclosures and understanding the self as a new extraction site, and the self as an extraction site is hardly new. It's just a new form of extracting self-identity, labor, imagination, image. Then what is there to learn from successful anti-colonial struggles? Because there have been many about how to respond to a moment like this. And maybe it isn't just, well, we all just need to kind of get with the times, because that doesn't necessarily end well.
No. And then, finally, where I've used your hour here, but I don't even know how to say. If I found myself a little bit sad after reading the book, thinking, if we lived in a different time, if there wasn't such an intense urgency to our predicament, might Naomi Klein write a novel? I want to read a novel. I want to read a play. I want to see. I so want to see you. It almost brings tears to me. I want to see you go there, because it's so you are so gifted in those when the passages go personal, when they go. It's I can't imagine. There's time. You're still young. There's still time. Would you see it as like, would there need to be a break in the action for you to do something like that? Would there need to, like, capitalism get solved? And then would you
I don't
consider,
see it that way, honestly. No, I think we desperately need art to believe we are in the moment we're in. You know, I honestly feel like we've hit a little bit of a wall with argument and evidence. I mean, sure, we still need to do it, and don't tell my bosses at the university, because the whole edifice is built on this idea that if we could just publish another paper proving that it really is, you know, a problem, and that maybe laws would change and maybe reality would change, and that pipeline is busted, you know, because this moment demands so much change, and there are such powerful vested interests in preventing that change. But there's also like a lot of hunger for that change. I mean, I think this was part of the heartbreak of the pandemic pivot from that first year, when so many people were saying, I want to change how I live. I don't want to go back to how I was living before. I finally have time to think. You know, those of us who were lucky enough to pause, right? And yeah, it was hard to have kids home, and it was hard to juggle all of that, and there was so much pain in it. But there was a slowing down, and I believe that slowing down is part of the reason why George Floyd's murder entered people's hearts in a different way, entered people who were not Black felt that in another way. And I think part of that was just slowing down, you know, and being able to go into streets and protest that weren't filled with cars, and all of, you know, and all of those sort of pandemic cliches of hearing bird song and all of that. Like, you know, I don't think it's going to be evidence that is going to shift us. I think there's a huge role for the arts. So whether I am part of that, whether I, you know, can push myself to, you know, to go further. I mean, I would love to, because, you know, I think I've lost a little bit of faith in what I can do just with argument. I think there's still a role for it, but I don't think the problem is that we don't know how fucked things are. I think I'm allowed to say that. I think that I think things have gone so far off the rails that we don't actually believe in our own reality. And what art can do is slow it down enough to re-experience the sort of unbelievable realities of these intersecting and overlapping emergencies, and to do it in rooms filled with other humans is the greatest gift of that we can give people, right? And that's something that theater can do, and to a lesser extent, you know, film can do. But we need it, like we really do. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I will try to push myself. It means a lot to me, Douglas, that you feel that way about me. I really did have fun writing this book.
I do, and probably even more gratifying too. I feel that way in a renewed way about myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Good.
I feel like it's okay. People who listen to the show know I'm threatening to do theater. It's like, oh, I get it. We fucking need it. That's the doppelganger, the most simple doppelganger. You're sitting there and there's another human up on the stage. We create the division. We build a doppelganger situation for the learning that takes place.
Yes.
So,
and it's embodied. Yes. Yeah. I love it. Oh, that's
all right.
Exciting.
So be it. The case closed.
Yes,
thank you. Thank you for writing this. Thank you for taking the risk. Thank you for publishing it. It's meant the world to me personally, and I assure everybody who reads this, just read the actual book, not the article, not the interview, not the thing. Read the there's books that you could read the excerpt. This is not that. This is like saying it's like what you're going to read the excerpt of Making Love with your partner for the first time. No, don't read it. Actually do it. You have to do it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.